This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, the door you should really always keep locked. Today we are discussing The Smiling Man. We are going to get right into it. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. So we're getting that something is going to happen that's going to make our narrator afraid, which maybe is a little bit too much information right off the bat. Maybe it's realistic that you would tell someone this is the kind of story you're going to be telling. I'll let you decide that. I'm not entirely sure how I feel on the matter. But let's continue on. I don't think we have enough information yet. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police patrol park where a ways from my apartment. That's weird phrasing. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was at most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Okay, so a bizarre premise that we have right off the bat. This is definitely the kind of image to get someone interested. It's definitely a unique image, and the idea of it's kind of like the waltz, that is telling us a lot of information on how to interpret this in our heads, so really strong so far. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth formed a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. So that's a fun way to describe the smile that he has, that it's a cartoon of a smile, not cartoonishly wide. It was a cartoon itself. Now, this creepypasta comes with a picture that I'm not exactly thrilled with. It's a drawn picture, it's drawn in pen, and it's drawn by someone who doesn't understand how to use pen effectively, but it is a perfectly fine picture. I just don't know that it tonally matches what we're supposed to be taking in. It's a little bit too goofy, scary, spoopy kind of deal. Again, I'm always a stickler for realism in creepypasta, and I think the image that I'm developing in my head is much stronger than the one being depicted to me. But let's continue on. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then he stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot on the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. Ooh, that's an interesting idea. So he's paused because our narrator has paused. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and the sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I really like how this is playing out. It's a fun, little creepy, tension-building experience. The only thing that I kind of think is disappointing is that our narrator is straight out telling us, unnerved and unnerved. They're saying it multiple times to really drive it home. Let us feel unnerved. Let us experience the situation as it is. Do not interfere with it and tell us how to feel. I know the narrator is saying how they feel, but it's too on the nose to tell us that. Just let us experience it, because it's functioning. But our smiling man is moving quick, so that's cool, that's interesting, unnerving, and everything. Continuing on. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him. And then he started moving towards me again. He took a giant, exaggerated tiptoe step. Exaggerated tiptoe steps. As if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. So a big no-no in writing is saying, much, or very, very, but it works well in Creepypasta because you're supposed to be telling a story from a very personal standpoint. The story is being told to us, so it's more conversational, so that's not a problem here. And what also is kind of something you probably want to avoid is saying sometime. Like, they hump for 10 men, as I once read in a really bad fan fiction. But this is something that someone would actually say, like, some time passed. That's normal phrasing, even though that's probably not up to literary code, as it were. But continuing on. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept towards me. So our narrator has pepper spray and a cell phone. So a cell phone that's giving us a somewhat more limited time frame. We know that it's within the time that cell phones have been around. And pepper spray heavily indicates that our narrator is a woman. Again, this is a sort of problem that Creepypasta has when you're telling a story in the first person. Sometimes, and it's a short story, sometimes it's easy to not give characterization. We don't even know the gender of our character, and that's a common problem that a lot of Creepypasta authors, including myself, have to deal with. The only reason people know the gender of my characters is because I'm a man and I'm often the one reading my stories. So that gives us the idea that this character is probably going to be more fearful of a stranger, whereas men tend to not be as fearful of strangers on the street. Continuing on. And then he stopped again, about a car's length away from me. Still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper, "Wah?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my voice, in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance-walking away, just like that. Not wanting to turn back to him again, I just watched him go. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. I was coming back, and he was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. So here we're getting specific details about the distance and that kind of situation. What we know is that they were less than a car length away, about a car length away. That is really uncomfortably close to be to a stranger at night on the street. And the way that our author is crippled with fear is a very believable way that some people would react. That is some good characterization. This is the climax of our story where this weird thing is happening, so let's see how this resolves. I ran until I was off the side of the road and onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to see. Credited to Blue Title. So, I have a few problems with the story that I pointed out, but overall, I really like the story. I think it's very effective. It's strong, and qualitatively, it's exhibiting what I want to see out of a creepypasta. It's anecdotal. It's this person telling you about their experience that is very strange, but nothing, not a single thing about this story is impossible. It's a very mundane horror story, and it's a very believable, grounded horror story. It's very believable that this kind of weird experience would happen, and there's no impossibility in it. The idea that our narrator just wouldn't want to go outside anymore at night, and this would disrupt their schedule and the way that they spent their time, that is a very memorable experience for a person and a very upsetting one. The idea that he didn't look drunk or he didn't look high, well, that's not necessarily true. He just looked completely insane, as this person says. There's nothing necessarily supernatural about this. It is just peculiar and unnerving. It's kind of unfortunate that we're being told to feel unnerved, but, we can let that slide because of how well this story is making us feel unnerved. This is really fitting. That classic kind of creepypasta story where it would be, it's a creepy story that would be copied and pasted around the internet, on anonymous message boards and things of that nature. It's functioning just as it is supposed to. If you have something to contribute to this conversation about this story, please leave a comment below. But now we should mention our sponsor for the day. Today our sponsor is Toyota. Toyota. Our cars will kill you, but we're endorsed by Hatsune Miku, so it's okay.